Welcome to Fireside Giants. My name is Alex with my co-host here, Anthony Rivardo, brought to you by Empire Sports Media. If you're new to the channel or just tuning in to YouTube, make sure to like and subscribe below. Got some awesome content coming out. Obviously, Anthony's been doing an awesome series, Gettlegon, X-Files, taking a look at each individual candidate as we prepare for the Giants to hire a general manager. They're really interviewing 9 guys specifically, and we want to talk about another duo. We've talked about Brian Daboll and Joe Schoen. We've talked about Adam Peters and Mike McDaniel. And I know a lot of people kind of jumped on that Mike McDaniel, Adam Peters train after the video that we created because they're a really intriguing duo. A lot of people had a lot of great things to say about Adam Peters and McDaniel. And we're going to talk about a similar kind of tandem today in Ryan Poles from the Kansas City, who overlooks all of their college scouting and helps with free agency and player personnel evaluations and whatnot. And Eric Bieniemy, who has interviewed for the Giants head coaching vacant spot in the past, didn't get it, but now he's probably going to be in the conversation again. Whether it's Joe Schoen or Adam Peters, it could be anybody. I guarantee you he'll be a candidate as a potential head coach. But it's intriguing to see that there's so many duos, right? You like to see, in my personal opinion, I think that the chemistry already built between let's say an offensive coordinator and a front office guy like Adam Peters, McDaniel, or the pairings that I've listed already. I think there's a benefit to hiring a GM and then them bringing their own guy from their own team because the chemistry's there. They know what they want to build and they know the process that will go into it. Instead of hiring one guy and then coming in, bringing in somebody completely different, they have to find ways to build synergy and chemistry and get on the right page. I think I like this kind of duo aspect that we've kind of been hitting on recently, Anthony. But before we dive into Ryan Poles and Eric Bieniemy and why this is a duo that should be intriguing for a lot of people, how you doing today, my friend?
I'm doing great, and I totally agree with you. I love the synergy aspect of these GM slash head coach connections that we're taking a look at. The Adam Peters with Mike McDaniel, the Joe Schoen with Brian Daboll. That connection is pretty important because it's something that you usually see with general managers, and you usually see it with coaching staffs, front offices. It's really about who you know. So whoever the Giants go ahead and hire at the GM spot, they're going to hire people that they know and already have a working relationship with in the front office, on the coaching staff. That's very likely. It's very rare that you see a guy who has his whole entire career was spent with the Chiefs, right? And then he goes and hires somebody whose entire career was spent with the Raiders, right? There's no connection there. They've never worked together. That's super rare to see. And that usually only happens if there's like some amazing interview or if they're just two like blue chip guys at their positions. So for these general manager candidates that we take a look at, a couple of them that I've done on the Ghetto Gone candidate mini series, I've had to say one of the biggest strengths for these guys is their coaching connections. For Joe Schoen, coaching connections was a huge strength for him. For Adam Peters, coaching connections was a huge strength for him because the Bills and the 49ers have a great coaching staff. Well, of course, the Kansas City Chiefs also have an excellent coaching staff, a Super Bowl winning coaching staff with one of the best head coaches in the NFL, and absolutely a top 5 offense in the NFL year in and year out. And Ryan Poles, in the executive director of player personnel, has been phenomenal, and Eric Bieniemy has been also excellent, working with Patrick Mahomes, working with Tyreek Hill, working alongside Andy Reid as his right-hand man, building out one of the best offenses in the NFL. So we've talked about Peters slash McDaniel, we've talked about Shane slash Daboll, and we said these are such great candidates. Well, Ryan Poles is also an excellent candidate. And you know what? Hats off to the Giants. They've put together a phenomenal list of candidates for the general manager position, better than they did in 2018 when they hired Gettleman, absolutely better than what they had there. This is a great candidate list. It's almost like they just can't go wrong. Now, knock on wood, because I don't want to see the Giants go ahead and make some awful selection of GM out of nowhere, that we were just not expecting. But it really sounds like, based on the list of candidates that they've interviewed so far, that they plan to interview as well, and the rumors as to who wants this Giants job, it sounds like the Giants are finally on track here and set to make a good selection in the front office. So fingers crossed. I hope that it all comes to fruition. But without further ado, let's dive into Ryan Poles, Eric Bieniemy, and the potential of this duo in New York.
Absolutely. I mean, you hit it on the head with saying that it's a lot more intriguing, the GM candidates this year. And for one major reason, they're outside guys. They're not interior Dave Gettleman's best friends with John Mara. We're just going to yes man the situation and let ownership have more of a say. They got to go in, get somebody who's going to bring another ethos philosophy to this team, because clearly the direction they've been going, the strategy that they've put in place has failed over and over and over again. They need to bring in a whole new thing. And I think that looking at the Bills, looking at the Chiefs, looking at San Francisco, all of those teams are on the way up. They're on the way up towards legitimate contention, if not already there. I think the Bills are Super Bowl contenders this year. I think the 49ers, with the right quarterback, would easily be Super Bowl contenders this year. I think Jimmy G, at the top of his game, could get them there. It's yet to be seen, obviously. Defense, really, really disciplined. Offense, very unique. And the fact that they're doing so well with the injuries at quarterback and using Deebo Samuel in the way that they have, it really attests to Mike McDaniel on the analytical side of things and the way he's been designing plays and modernizing that running game. And then you have Eric Bieniemy, and he's the OC over in Kansas City. He doesn't call plays, just like Mike McDaniel. So those guys have similar roles. They're really helping in the designing of the scheme and the play calls and the pre-snap motion, all the different little details that go into things, but they're not calling the plays. And is that something to be concerned about? I wouldn't say necessarily, because I prefer my head coach not to call plays at times, unless you have an Andy Reid, unless you have a Kyle Shanahan, which is extremely unique. Um, Maybe a head coach takes that role on in the future. Maybe you say Eric Bieniemy or whatever it might be. Maybe they start calling calling plays as a head coach. It's an interesting discussion to have, because maybe they want to bring in an offensive coordinator who calls the plays, and then they kind of just get their feet wet and then take over play calling. A lot of things go into this, but I want to talk about Ryan Poles and I want to talk about Eric Bieniemy. Now, Poles is interesting. He's really young, 36 years old. Completing his first season, the Kansas City Chiefs executive director of player personnel, and 13th year with the team. So he's only been in this role for 1 year as the executive director of player personnel. Maybe that's too soon to elevate him to a GM spot. A lot of people have a lot of great things to say. And I will also say this, at 36 years old, to be where he is right now, he's got to be smart as hell. He's got to be at the cutting edge of analytics, at the cutting edge of player personnel and evaluation. To be 36 years old and in that job, you got to be damn impressive of a candidate. So I'll tell you what, I'm not opposed to grabbing him and pairing him with Eric Bieniemy. And like I said, the duos, the ability for these guys to go out and pluck ready-made head coaches is just a very unique offseason. You don't normally find the level of head coach candidates that are paired with the level of general manager candidates. Usually it's like you're getting a GM and you're then bringing in a head coach afterward who could be from a different organization, Anthony. So when you're looking at Ryan Poles, do you think that because he's attached to Eric Bieniemy, it's a more attractive suiting for the Giants? Or do you think that, Ryan Poles himself being just one season as executive director of player personnel, do you think it's a little too soon to consider him as a legitimate candidate?
I don't think it's too soon, because if you read about Ryan Poles and the credit that he's received in that role and all of the roles that he's held previously, he's getting a lot of credit for a lot of these draft selections, and he is really loved by the Kansas City Chiefs organization. He has received much praise from very high up people in front offices. People really think that Ryan Poles might be the next superstar in the front office, right? He might be that young guy, cutting edge, as you mentioned, comes in, takes a general manager job, grabs it by the throat, chokes it to death, and absolutely beats it up, because he really is a smart guy. And also, one of the things that I love about him is he is a former player. Now, if you didn't know this about Ryan Poles, he was an offensive tackle for Boston College at the time when Matt Ryan was playing there. And if you do some reading on him, he was a pretty good player as well, through some key blocks in a season opener or something. Matt Ryan went on to throw 5 touchdown passes in that game against Wake Forest, and it was a phenomenal performance from Ryan Poles. And one of the things that I love about that, being that he's a former offensive tackle, former offensive lineman, I mean, you guys all know the New York Giants absolutely need help on the offensive line, and they have not done a good job scouting or evaluating offensive line talent in recent years. I mean, Dave Gettleman just honestly failed in that regard. But if you take a look at what the Kansas City Chiefs have done in recent years with Ryan Poles in the front office, scouting offensive linemen and everything. Now, I want to throw this out there to you, Alex. Do you know who the number one graded center from PFF is this season? This is a
Creed
name. This is a name
Humphrey.
you know. It's
Um,
Creed Humphrey. Yeah, Creed
yeah.
Humphrey is the number one graded
Waiting for you to say
center in
yes.
the NFL this year. Rookie Creed Humphrey. Isn't that insane that he was the number one graded center? I mean, we loved him pre-draft process. Apparently, Ryan
hmm
Poles and the Chiefs front office loved him pre-draft process. And now he was the number one graded center in the NFL by PFF this year as a rookie. So that's a tremendous job finding talent, not even in the first round, finding talent in the NFL draft to fix the offensive line. They also made that move to go get Orlando Brown, shore up the left tackle spot, made the move in free agency, Joe Thuney at left guard. Of course, Trey Smith in the 6th round, evaluated that talent. He was a phenomenal starter, 18th graded right guard in the NFL. I mean, he's just been one of the best young guards in the league. And if you look all across this team, all of the young talent that they have, I mean, Miko Hardman's a good player. Bryce Pringle is a pretty good player. Of course, you got Clyde Edwards-Helaire in the backfield. And you just look at this team, the talent evaluation has been phenomenal in recent years. They built one of the strongest offensive rosters in the NFL. And of course, who's helping propel that offensive roster into success? Of course, Andy Reid gets the majority of the credit, as he should, but his right-hand man has been Eric Bieniemy. So I'm forgetting exactly what your original question was. I think it was, does Eric Bieniemy being attached to Ryan Poles make the job more attractive, if I'm correct? And in a way, yes, but also in a way, maybe it's more attractive to me and to many of the fans because we really like Eric Bieniemy. But I know that there has been a lot of discussion in front offices and from owners around the league that aren't too crazy about Eric Bieniemy. And now there's a couple reasons why. And I, first of all, he has some stuff in his past, right? If you go and you search Eric Bieniemy, there are things in his past that are a little bit shady. They don't look too good on a public record, and so that does scare some owners and front office members when they're deciding whether or not to make this guy a head coach. Now, I don't think that would scare Ryan Poles at all. If the Giants are giving the general manager the ability to hire a head coach, I think there's a really good chance if they hired Ryan Poles that he would want to hire Eric Bieniemy. I think there's a really good chance of that. And of course, Eric Bieniemy is one of the smartest offensive minds in football. He is phenomenal at what he does on the offensive side of the ball. And another thing, though, I said that there was two things. The other thing is that in recent years, Eric Bieniemy has gotten a lot of interviews for head coaching jobs, but he just hasn't landed a job. Like I said, one of the reasons why is because of some stuff off the field many years ago. But another reason is he bombs pretty much every interview, according to all of these sources. According to these sources, he's just not good at interviewing. And John Mara even mentioned that in one of his press conferences this week. He said not everyone has a good interview, not everyone has a bad interview, but you just have to find out who's the best for the job, whether they interview well or not. You can't base it solely on the interview process, right? So if John Mara sticks true to that, he might look at the reputation and the career history of Eric Bieniemy and get past maybe a bad interview that he had. But there is something to be said about that, right? Because Eric Bieniemy has had a couple of opportunities, a few interviews, and it just hasn't worked out, despite the fact that he seems like maybe one of the most qualified candidates for a head coaching job in recent years. So, I mean, I would like Eric Bieniemy as head coach. I think that's cutting edge. I think that's offensive minded. That's the stuff that I love. And of course, when you go with Ryan Poles, you're still cutting edge. You're offensive minded. You're building a good offensive line with Ryan Poles. I can almost guarantee that. I could
I
almost
was
bet
just
if
about to say, let
yeah,
me
you're
just say something really quickly. There's a
go ahead.
video, there's an interview of Ryan Poles, and if you're a Giants fan, the he's wearing a sweatshirt, and on the sweatshirt it says OL Masterminds. Hire the
Mm,
man instantaneously. Hire the man.
right. I
He
love
is
that.
a freaking monster at drafting and finding offensive line talent. Look at that
Absolutely.
Chiefs. They went from one of the worst offensive lines to one of the best in one offseason. They nailed the shit out of the draft, nailed the shit out of free agency. If you want your offensive line solved, Ryan Poles is your guy. That's all I have to say.
And I'm going to go out there and say this as well. This is a little bit of a prediction. Out of all of the GM candidates that the Giants will interview, if I had to predict the NFL draft and say if any of these guys are bound to take two offensive linemen with our first round picks, it's Ryan Poles. I think he's the most likely to just go number 5 and number 7 overall, just draft two offensive linemen and call it a day. And I would love that. Honestly, you guys know this. I've been saying it on the podcast for a while. I do want the Giants to go with two first round offensive linemen. And if there is a candidate who's most likely to do that, it's Ryan Poles, the O-line mastermind who rebuilt the Kansas City Chiefs offensive line overnight. And I would love to see him do that with the New York Giants. I'm a huge fan of Ryan Poles as a candidate for the GM spot. And as I mentioned, I think Eric Bieniemy, it's his time to be a head coach. And if he ends up being the head coach of the New York Giants, I will be excited as hell.
Yeah, I mean, look, everyone right now is saying offensive line, offensive line, offensive line. Spend all 9 picks on the offensive line. Blah blah blah. We know the spiel, but he actually is the guy you want if you want to build a good offensive line. Now, everyone has their own strengths and weaknesses. I would put my money in saying that Joe Shane would also have a good chance at building a good offensive line. I'd put my money in saying Adam Peters would, because the Bills have managed to secure a pretty decent offensive line. I think they're the 14th ranked pass blocking unit. Then you have the 49ers. Obviously, I think they're 7th or 6th. And then, what's the other team that we're talking about here? Why am I blanking on it? The 49ers, Kansas
Buffalo
City.
Bills, Kansas City Chiefs.
Okay, yeah, Kansas City. Sorry, I think Kansas City is the 6th ranked pass blocking unit. So any of those guys have success. They're above average in offensive line, but The Chiefs specifically, I mean, of course, Patrick Mahomes makes them look really good, but if you have a good quarterback, it makes it even better. If you want to get a guy who's really good at, evaluating these collegiate talents and these free agents and finding guys that aren't going to destroy your cap space, Ryan Poles is your guy. Like, he is actually phenomenal at finding offensive line talent. And how much value is that to you? Do you think that that's something that might push it over the edge for him as a candidate?
I mean, when we keep saying prioritize the offensive line, fix the offensive line, and if there's a guy to do that, it's Ryan Poles. So yeah, he's definitely up near the top for that reason alone. It definitely gives him some extra brownie points in my book when you're talking about how desperately we want to fix this offensive line, and you're talking about the best. He might be the best offensive line talent evaluator in the NFL, arguably, and he's also a former offensive lineman. He knows what it takes to be successful as an offensive lineman. He knows the technique. He knows how to get it down. There's probably no one better suited to draft for the offensive line than Ryan Poles, to find free agency talent for the offensive line than Ryan Poles. So it definitely gives him a little bit of a boost in the candidate rankings, in my opinion.
And me as well. I think you have to factor that in. As a Giants fan, as a team that's probably going to roll with Daniel Jones for one more year, maybe go out and get another quarterback in 2023. The offensive line is arguably the most important piece. And Anthony, if you're looking at the draft right now, do you think the offensive line is like you're using those first the top 10 picks on the OL?
I would love to do it. And like I said, if there's any candidate that I think is likely to do it, it's Ryan Poles. I think he's the most likely to take those 2 first-round picks and turn it into offensive linemen. But I'll say another thing, okay? He's very likely to take 2 offensive linemen in the first round because that's what he likes to do, is draft offensive linemen. But I'll also say this. The Kansas City Chiefs are known for trading down. They're known for trading away their first-round picks, potentially for big talent at other positions. They did trade a first-round pick to go ahead and get Orlando Brown Jr., in recent years. They got him with a first round pick, which was a great bargain for both teams, actually. But they did that, and then they've also used their draft picks to actually draft offensive linemen. But the Chiefs do make a lot of trades. And no, I don't think that's Ryan Poles doing that because he's more of a scout. I think that's Brett Veach, their general manager, doing that stuff, of course. But there is something to be said because this guy is learning from the Chiefs general manager. He could be learning how to get the most value out of the draft picks, whether that be taking 2 offensive linemen in the first round, or whether that be trading one of those picks for an established offensive lineman, or trading one of those picks down and getting a better offensive lineman in a later round. So there is a lot to be said about how the Chiefs run their front office, how they run their drafts. They do draft a lot of offensive linemen, talented ones as well, and they do draft a lot of offensive skill position players who are really talented, but they also make a lot of really valuable trades with their draft picks. And I think that's something to take note of as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm looking at, the grades for the offensive linemen this year, and the Chiefs have 2 guys in the top 3. 2 guards in the top 3 offensive linemen in pass blocking this year. And it's just really nice to see that they've put good guys in place to protect their quarterback. And then, as you said, Creed Humphrey is the 4th best run blocker in football. The 4th best run blocker in football. He's the highest graded center in football. And what is he, a rookie? He's a rookie, right? That's absurd. That's absurd, guys. Absurd to see a rookie in the top 5 at their position, top 5, top 4 in run blocking. You don't just stumble across these guys. This comes from phenomenal talent evaluation. It just over and over again they're knocking it out of the park. I mean, Creed Humphrey is absolute stud. He's a good pass blocker as well. He's up there. I think he's top 5 at his position, or top 10 at his position at the very least. And it's just, when you have guys at that level and your front office is killing it year in and year out. I mean, I'm just going down the list, and it's not just Kansas City, right? San Francisco, Trent Williams, best offensive grade of any offensive lineman in the league this year. Trent Williams, right? You go down the line a couple more. Then you have Creed Humphrey from Kansas City. You got Tom Compton, tackle, San Francisco. He's the 9th best offensive lineman in the league this year. He's one of the best run blocking grades in football. Like, we're talking about all these guys right now, and they have multiple guys in the top 15. And it's just over and over, like, they're just nailing it. When you have Joe Thuney, he's a top 60 offensive lineman this year. I mean, like, there is just over and over. You're looking at all these candidates we're talking about right now. They have tremendous offensive line talent, and they're really good at finding them. And as a Giants fan, that's music to my freaking ears because I can't wait to see an Eric Bieniemy. I think that even if you're a bad, I'm tired of the good interviews convincing John Mara that they're good for the job. Joe Judge crushed the interview, knocked it out of the park. What does that mean anymore? You know what I mean? Like if you're a good interview, it doesn't mean you're going to be good on the job. So even if Eric Bieniemy is a shit interviewer and he doesn't have the gall, he doesn't have the outgoing, the right speaking voice. I don't really care about that because when he's in the locker room motivating his players, it's totally different than talking to the front office personnel in an interview setting where you're nervous and it's not football really. You're putting out a strategy, but you're not in that moment. You know what I mean? It's totally different separating the interview from the actual head coaching. I think Eric Bieniemy would be a fine head coach. And I think the players would relate to him a lot more. And especially because what is there, one African American and NFL GM or NFL head coach now? One? Tom,
It's just Mike
what's his name?
Tomlin. Just Mike
Just Mike
Tomlin.
Tomlin. Like, we need more diversity in the NFL, guys. And I think Eric Bieniemy would be a phenomenal head coach. I think he'd be a great head coach with the right pairing. Ryan Poles, build up that offensive line. We might be seeing Daniel Jones take the actual step forward that we need him to take moving forward. You already got Andrew Thomas. You have 2 top 10 picks. You got plenty of mid-rounds, some money in free agency. When we get rid of some guys, I guarantee we're going to be sellers this offseason, opening up some cap space. And Ryan Poles did a phenomenal job with Veach and, that Kansas City front office plugging those holes a couple years ago or last offseason. So I'm pretty excited to see what these guys can do. And I know we're selling, and the point of these videos is to sell these combinations to you the best we can, right? Because we're telling you all the strengths. If we convince you that Ryan Poles and Eric Bieniemy is the duo the team should go with, we did the same thing with Adam Peters and Mike McDaniel yesterday. The day before that, Brian Dable, Joe Shane. We're trying to promote how good these guys can be and the strengths and weaknesses that they do have. Now, the weaknesses, as I mentioned, Ryan Poles, very inexperienced as an executive, right? He's really climbed the tree, 13 years with the Kansas City Chiefs, first year in this executive role, so he's inexperienced. That's a weakness. Eric Bieniemy, you're looking at him, has missed out on a lot of head coaching spots. Maybe there's something that we don't know. The past he has definitely dampens his stock to a degree, Anthony. But is there anything else you want to add to this? Because I think we've covered pretty much everything well here.
I'll just say if you want an offensive minded head coach that can develop, first of all, an offensive line. Of course, we mentioned a lot of the offensive line stuff with Ryan Poles. But if you want an offensive minded head coach that can develop a quarterback, go look at what Patrick Mahomes has said about Eric Bieniemy in the past. He doesn't believe that he would be the player that he is today if the Chiefs did not have Eric Bieniemy on staff. He gives a lot of credit, yes, to Andy Reid and really the entire coaching staff, but he has given glowing reviews of Eric Bieniemy. He feels like Eric Bieniemy should be a head coach, and if there's anyone whose word you should take, it's probably Patrick Mahomes. He's arguably the most talented player to ever throw a football, right? Like, he is just so physically gifted and talented, but he's also very well coached, and he's also turned himself into not only a physically talented quarterback, but just a good all-around quarterback. It's Patrick Mahomes, man. Like, if there's anyone to take the word from on quarterback talent, quarterback coaching, I'm going to take it from Patrick Mahomes, and he thinks that Eric Bieniemy should be a head coach. He has really given so many great reviews for Eric Bieniemy and has given him a lot of credit for the development of Patrick Mahomes in his short career so far. So if you want to say Eric Bieniemy can't be a head coach, whatever, just rethink that. Go look at what Patrick Mahomes has said about him, because he really does believe in him as a head coaching candidate.
Absolutely. Well, guys, hope you enjoyed this episode of Fireside Giants. Make sure to like and subscribe as always. Coming out with new video and content every single day for you. If you're interested in written content, head over to Empire Sports Media, our website, where we are publishing content and good stuff over there, so you can check out all the updated news whenever it drops. And obviously our Twitter accounts, always posting there some information and videos and anything that we find that we think is useful and beneficial for you guys, so you can formulate your opinions and have good conversation. I appreciate all the comments in the YouTube section as well. Some really great opinions. And even if you disagree with us, that's a good thing. I want to have discussions with you, have good talks, have good conversation. That's the point. That's what we're trying to build here. If you have something bad to say, mean to say, I'm not going to respond, so go ahead and do it. But if you have something conversational to say, I always try to respond to everybody and I appreciate and I respect your opinions as well. So appreciate all the love as always. Hopefully you guys enjoyed the episode, and I'll catch you guys on the next one.